Okay, hopefully everyone can see that okay. So welcome. Today's Calico demo is going to be not Kubernetes network policy management. I might have hit the wrong slide. This is advanced ingress, Calico Ingress Gateway traffic management today. So with that, what I'll be doing is just starting off with a bit of an introduction to sort of what Calico is, Kubernetes, etc. A little bit about Ingress, Calico Ingress Gateway, and sort of running through some of the different scenarios of traffic management options that Calico Ingress Gateway gives you, as well as how you can sort of use that with Calico to validate those flows, and then how you can go on to secure sort of backend services inside your cluster as well. So bear with me 1 second. In the meantime, while I just get my screen sharing set up properly, what I'll do is just run a little poll just to sort of see and sort of gauge how experienced or aware of Calico everybody is. So I'll be running a little bit of a poll that should pop up on your engagement panel, I believe. So the poll is around sort of Calico networking and security policies, but you could sort of apply that answer sort of in a broader Calico context as well. So if you're already familiar with Calico and some of the network policies, you might choose novice, advanced, depending on how you're using it. Or if you're fairly newer to Calico, you might have a bit of an understanding of what Calico is, what Calico does. You're probably a little bit more beginner intermediate. So let me just make sure I'm sharing the right presentation. Okay, so it looks like we've got a few votes. Looks like people are a lot more sort of on the beginner intermediate side of sort of Calico and on networking policies as well. So that's good to know. I'll give people just a few more seconds to vote if they want to before we get started. Okay, perfect. So I'll introduce Calico, as we've got quite a few sort of newer people in the audience today. So Calico provides sort of a single solution for all of your Kubernetes networking, network security, observability needs. So this can be from managing sort of ingress traffic, egress traffic, to enforcing those east-west policies. Calico offers comprehensive capabilities. And so Calico is distribution agnostic. So you can see at the bottom of this slide all the different distributions and managed services that Calico can run on. So that gives you a consistent experience, no matter really where you're applying or deploying your clusters. So Calico will seamlessly extend your network security and observability to your multi-cluster deployments as well. So we have some customers who have sort of multiple clusters, maybe in different regions for high availability, fault tolerance, of geographical compliance, etc. So Calico can also extend a lot of the functionality across clusters, as well as if you have sort of one larger single cluster. So as well, we have different support for different data planes. So we've got eBPF, Linux NF tables or IP tables, or you've got compatibility with the Windows data plane. And as well as sort of depending on where your infrastructure actually lives, whether it's in a sort of public cloud, private cloud, on-prem, whether you've got things at the edge, containers, VMs, bare metal, etc. Again, you get that consistent experience no matter sort of what distribution your Kubernetes clusters live on, where they're living, what data plane you're using, etc. So with that, we've got a bit of an overview of a lot of the functionality that I was just talking about. So this can sort of be used consistently, again, no matter what your distribution, where your cluster lives, etc. And I've kind of highlighted some of the sort of features that we'll be talking about today. So with advanced ingress traffic management, I've highlighted the CNI, and a lot of people sort of get familiar with Calico because they are using it as their container networking interface inside their cluster. And then we are here today to look at Calico Ingress Gateway. And I've also added dynamic service graph in here as well, just because the Ingress sort of gateway, Calico Ingress Gateway, ties in really nicely with all of the observability that Calico provides. So you not only get a way to sort of verify, sort of check that your Ingress traffic is being routed correctly, it's coming in, sort of keep an eye on the load, performance, etc. You also get to see all of the traffic where it's going to on the backends. You can see if they're protected or not with network policies. Sort of use that as sort of a fully end-to-end. If you've got the traffic coming in, you're not just managing the traffic, but you're also making it secure once it's coming in and traveling inside of your cluster as well. So yeah, so I'll sort of introduce a little bit sort of the Calico Ingress Gateway. So hopefully here you know the sort of Ingress is an entry point for handling traffic into your Kubernetes cluster. So this could be traffic routing, you might be interested in Ingress security, traffic management, all at the application layer. So Calico provides a hardened version of Envoy, which we're using as a proxy for making sure that we're sending traffic to the correct backends. And this is built on or supports the Gateway API. So this follows Kubernetes standards, and this can be used consistently no matter where your cluster is, whether it's on-prem, in the cloud, etc. So the Gateway API is sort of newer. This was built to be more extensible, more consistent. So if you've been using Ingress controllers in the past and sort of the more sort of traditional Ingress solutions, so things like Nginx, traffic, etc., you may have struggled if you've ever had to move from one to the other. Maybe you've got different environments, different teams doing things, and you end up with sort of making those solutions work to your needs by putting in a lot of different annotations to get it to do what you want it to do. So a lot of people have struggled with sort of managing that, having consistency across different environments, and even migrating between them. So with Calico, you get to sort of manage, secure, and observe your cluster traffic from Ingress using the new Gateway API, so it should be more standardized going forward, as well as managing your traffic within your cluster, keeping it secure, and traffic that leaves your cluster as well. So you can see a few of the sort of features on the slide here about what you get with the Calico Ingress Gateway. And I'll talk through some of these sort of traffic management patterns that people are doing. So because this Calico demo is more sort of on the advanced Ingress side, we've done a few sort of more introduction to Calico Ingress Gateway demos as well. So that's where I've kind of walked through examples showing how to set up things like traffic splitting. So the Calico Ingress Gateway, you'll sort of, instead of doing loads of different annotations, you'll have a sort of YAML file that defines what your backend references are. So this would be sort of app 1, app 2, and then you sort of build your HTTP routes that determine where that traffic is going to, so which of those backend references it's going to. And then you can control your traffic splitting, so you can add weights to them. So you can see here we've got app 1 that would be receiving 90% of the traffic, app 2 would be receiving 10%. And this can be useful if you're sort of doing canary, blue-green deployments. You want to test out traffic. We'll start by sending traffic to one application mostly, check that the application that's receiving less of the traffic is working correctly, it's responding correctly. And then over time, you can swap those weightings around. Maybe if you're just bringing up a sort of new service that's going to run in parallel, you get it to sort of like a 50-50 split. Otherwise, you might have a scenario where the app 2 would be the new version. You'll eventually want that to take over and be 100% of the traffic, and you can then remove app v1. Request mirroring. So this is something that I'll actually be showing in a moment. So, but I put this after the traffic splitting because there is one of the use cases for sort of request mirroring, having a shadow app where you might want to be deploying a new application. You don't necessarily want it to be responding to clients yet, but you want to test how it performs with those requests coming in. So that's where you can configure your HTTP routes to route traffic to a shadow app. But that app might try to respond, but the Calico Ingress Gateway will block that traffic from going back to the client. So they will never know that the traffic is kind of being routed to 2 different applications or services on the back end. Or some people will use that shadow app for sort of performance or load testing, debugging, troubleshooting, security testing, where you might have vulnerability scanning. So you might have that traffic being sent to scanning tools, but you don't want to impact the sort of live performance of the sort of main app that would be responding to client requests. You might also put in place rate limiting, so you can do this based on headers as well. So you might want to rate limit certain users coming in if the header sort of has that value. And then so people might put rate limiting in place just to protect services from being overloaded, create API request limits, or prevent malicious activity such as DDoS attacks. And yeah, you can do this. Set up your rate limiting. I guess there's a blanket rate limiting for all of them. Or you can sort of do that based on different traffic attributes, such as user headers. And I guess you might even have different users. Let's say if they've paid for more API requests, they're on a higher tier of service, you might not rate limit them the same as someone on a free tier, for example. You also have direct responses if you just want the gateway to handle certain requests without forwarding them to the backend services, and you can have the Calico Ingress Gateway just respond directly. And load balancing as well. So again, in some of the more introduction to Calico Ingress Gateway demos that we've done, we've set up the Calico Ingress Gateway. We've done some load balancing examples, things like random load balancing or round robin, which are probably the more common ones. It'll just distribute the traffic fairly evenly to the backend services, or with random, send it to whichever backend services. You also have load balancing. You can send it to a least request. So if one of the services has fewer sort of active connections at that time, the load balancer will send it to that service it can handle to try and balance the load. And you can also set up consistent hash, which is one of the more advanced load balancing techniques. So this is really useful if you have sticky sessions, if that's important. So again, similar to the rate limiting things coming in, you can determine or define what you want that hash to be based on. So if you were doing this based on sort of client IP address coming in, every time the same user, as long as their IP address stays the same, hits the Calico Ingress Gateway, their requests are always going to be sent to the same backend service or application, where someone else coming in with a different IP address probably get routed to a different service. So you'll choose what you want that hash to be, and then your traffic will always get routed to that same backend service. And then we do have some features on the roadmap. So not currently released at the moment, but we are working to sort of integrate a WAF with the Calico Ingress Gateway as well. So at the moment, we have sort of a workload-based WAF in our commercial editions that helps monitor traffic. We have some examples in some of our workshops where we sort of enable that, have it block malicious or suspicious looking requests. But we are working to incorporate that with Calico Ingress Gateway as well. And then one of the other sort of more advanced sort of configurations or setups that we're currently sort of exploring is the ability to integrate Calico Ingress Gateway with the Calico Cluster Mesh. So Calico Cluster Mesh sort of gives extra functionality and support if you've got clusters that are sort of meshed together. So it's not as sort of intense or complicated as a full-on service mesh, but it does allow you to federate your services across clusters. You can interact with them in sort of a Kubernetes native way. You can apply network policies too, so that intent will then apply across all of your clusters that have been meshed together, not just the local cluster. And then because those policies are using identity-based labels to sort of target where the rules in those network policies are coming from, or what those policies apply to, and that will then work in multiple clusters. So if you've got clusters in different regions, they're meshed together. Now we're currently exploring how you can use Ingress Gateway to help with that. So if you've already got your endpoints and sort of services federated, how can you sort of incorporate Calico Ingress Gateway with that and sort of add rules and routing in, determine where you want to send your traffic to based on cluster as well. So with that bit of an introduction to some of the scenarios that Calico Ingress Gateway supports, I'll just walk you through some of the examples that I've sort of set up. And I guess this is in sort of like typical DIY art show style, one I created earlier, knowing that we were doing this very early in the morning today, at least for me on the West Coast. So we've got some examples here kind of showing, I can get it to pause here. So we're describing our route here. So when you're configuring a Calico Ingress Gateway or even the Envoy Gateway, you'll be building HTTP routes. And I kind of mentioned these. So these can be listed, well, here, we've got the route here, which you can see you've got the backend references defined. So let me see, it's still not letting me pause it. If not, I'll just risk showing you actually in my cluster itself. So there we go. Hopefully the route stays there. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so when you're sort of building out your HTTP routes, you give it some metadata, like say what the name is, and it gives the route a name, and then you'll be defining your backend refs. So for this one, you can see that you've got two different backend refs. We've got an Echo server pod. It lives in two different namespaces. So we've got our namespace 1, namespace 2. We've got a port, we've got a waiting. So if you were doing traffic splitting and you wanted more traffic to be sent to NS1, while you're testing NS2 before you start bringing that and sending more traffic to NS2, you would then change the weighting here. But at the moment, both have a weighting of 1, so that traffic will get distributed evenly. So then we can also get the sort of IP address of the gateway and then send requests to that to test it. So this is just sending multiple requests both to the sort of /NS1/NS2. And then we can see how those appear inside Calico Whisker. So with Calico Open Source 3.30 and above, you get Calico Whisker in sort of stored with you, and that gives you a way of sort of monitoring and watching all of your flow logs. So you can kind of check in real time that your traffic is doing exactly what you want it to do. So this is also really useful for writing network policies as well. So if you've been able to sort of monitor, check that your ingress traffic is being routed to the right backend services, you can see here we've got the NS2 namespace, you've got that Echo server NS2 pod, which received that traffic or handled that traffic. And we could then go on, start to write network policies to secure it because we know what the destination port is. We know what the labels are for the source and destination. So we can use all of this information to write our network policies, network policy rules, as well as sort of checking that the Calico Ingress Gateway is routing traffic to the right backend services. And sort of getting started with the Calico Ingress Gateway is pretty easy to enable inside your Calico cluster if you've already got Calico running inside your clusters. And I'll put a link in the chat in a moment too, just to make sure that everybody knows where to find that. So now let me make sure I turn off my auto play before I show you the traffic mirroring. So, so here again, all of these sort of examples that I kind of showed you will be using the HTTP routes probably to determine how that traffic gets routed. So even with the sort of load balancing options too, you're setting up those HTTP routes, setting out what those backend refs are and how you want that traffic sort of balanced between them. You can see here for the HTTP request mirroring, we've got two backend refs in here. So we've got the service, just a backend service with again a weight of 1. And we've got the port 3000. Now we've also added a filter this time. So now you've got a sort of option for request mirror. You're adding another backend ref here. This is kind of the same service, just backend 2 this time. So now when traffic comes in, hits the Calico Ingress Gateway, as long as it matches of how the route is set up for this one, traffic will get sent to both of these backends. But because this is sort of mirroring, backend 2 actually won't be able to respond and send anything back to the client. That will all be coming from sort of main backend service here. And then again, knowing the sort of IP address of the gateway, we can sort of make some call requests to that. And we can see that here we've got our backends example here, just running some of those commands, putting the right IP address in. And then you can see here, at the bottom, it went to the default namespace, and you've got that backend pod here, which was the one that responded. So we didn't see the backend 2 respond, just the sort of main backend pod that we put in those references in the HTTP route. And then again, you can go into Calico Whisker if you're in open source and just sort of verify that those flows are coming through. So you get 12 hours with the flow logs in Whisker. That's the sort of back in time amount of logs it will collect. But it does refresh every few seconds, which you can see here just with the latest flow logs that have been collected. And then you can add filters. So we've got our destination namespace. We've set that to default. And then we're just sort of waiting, and we will watch every time new traffic comes in where the destination was that default namespace. It will show up here in this view. And then you can see we've got all of the traffic coming in from the Calico Ingress Gateway, coming in from that namespace to the default namespace. And we can actually verify that the traffic was still getting sent to both the backend and the backend 2, which was our shadow service. And I guess if we'd added more filters in, we would potentially see traffic being there reported going back as well. But you can sort of use the Calico Whisker to verify that, yep, the Calico Ingress Gateway is working correctly. And for every request that we made, so on the command line, you can see that that was sent to both backend references. And again, and if you wanted more information, you can just click on any of the rows in Calico Whisker to have a look at that. So it's kind of showing you Calico Ingress Gateway with open source. So Calico Ingress Gateway is available in all editions of Calico. So you've got open source, both Calico Cloud and Calico Enterprise. With Calico, sort of the commercial editions of Calico, what you do get as well is the option for support. So some people, if they're using some of the open source sort of current ingress controllers or Nginx or traffic, if they're just using the open source, you may not be getting support with that, whereas some larger organizations do want enterprise support with that. So you do get that with the commercial editions of Calico. But as well with open source, you do get access to Calico Cloud free tier if you want. So this is a sort of service you can sign in, you can see here, and you just get a little bit more in terms of like observability, functionality, especially with network policies for your open source clusters. And this is sort of a more sort of lightweight feature reduced version of our commercial and enterprise, commercial cloud and enterprise offerings of Calico. So in here, the sort of first option, just moving down the menu bar on the left here, we've got dashboards. So at the moment, I'm just sort of modifying a filter to look for traffic for the last 10 hours. And instead of just necessarily going through sort of a list of flow logs like you do in Whisker, you can add filters in here. So you can see so the destination namespace equals default. That's where those backend services were living. It's a pretty unexciting dashboard at the moment, but just a very simple example of how you can sort of build custom filters to sort of monitor it in a different way. If you prefer a more visual sort of style of monitoring, just checking that everything's going okay. You can see that all of our data volume was coming from the Calico Ingress Gateway. Then you have other stats on here with the dashboards as well. So with Calico free tier, you get traffic volume, you get cluster health, and I believe a flow logs dashboard as well. So you can sort of filter and have just a different view for monitoring everything that's going on inside your cluster. And then with Calico Cloud free tier as well, you get 24 hours worth of flow logs. So it just gives you a little bit more information if you need a little bit more time while you're sort of testing services, if you're testing your sort of HTTP routes, etc., or your network policies, while you're getting your cluster sort of set up or a new application deployed. And then we also have Calico Service Graph. So you can see that here is sort of visualization of everything that's inside your cluster. So based on all the flow logs that you're familiar with that we saw in Whisker, this builds sort of, I guess, like puts all the dependencies, it knows where traffic is flowing to or from, and sort of builds a map here. So we can see that we've got the Calico Ingress Gateway service here, and the traffic is going from there to the default namespace, which we know is where our backend pods live. And then again, as you can see, that line is a little bit bolder. I've clicked on that line, you get a few insights here. You can quickly see what ports, what protocol, which is useful when writing your network policies, as well as having an auto-filtered flow log view down at the bottom here. So we can see that now all of our flows are just filtered for traffic coming from the Calico Ingress Gateway to those backend pods in the default namespace. So you don't have to start writing filters immediately. You can just do it by sort of clicking around in the service graph, which just makes things a little bit easier. It's a lot more visual and just provides a lot more context to the flows that are going on inside your cluster. And then again, just like in Whiskey, you can expand them, get more information about those traffic flows, which again, useful if you want to secure the traffic once it's sort of inside your cluster and kind of moving around in there. And when I mentioned too, you get more functionality with things like network policies. So you get policy recommendations. So especially for namespace isolation, a lot of people have this set up if they have larger clusters where they have a lot of different applications being deployed and they need to make sure that sort of those applications are secured, not getting interference from anything else. We also have our policies board, so you can see any policies that are applied into your cluster will get listed here. You can manage them, you can group them into tiers, evaluate the order really quickly. And as well, network sets. So this kind of ties into the sort of ingress, egress traffic that you might be interested in. But network sets provide a way for you to sort of group and list together IP addresses. So I can get it to pause here. You can see that we've got a list here for embargoed countries of all IP addresses that might be associated with a country that you sort of want to block traffic to inside your cluster. We've got more here for other countries. People use this for threat feeds. And then what you would see is this traffic name show up. So we've got the embargo country's name. That would show up inside your flow logs then. So it just helps give you more context to traffic that's sort of leaving and entering your cluster. And so with Calico Open Source, you can do that via IP addresses, add your list of IP addresses, as well as in the commercial editions, you can also do that by domain name. So it's just sort of like an extra sort of feature to help with your traffic as it's entering and leaving your cluster. So that's a bit of a quick tour of some of the more advanced or more options that Calico Ingress Gateway gives you for traffic management, as well as what the benefit of sort of doing that with Calico is, because you get that extra observability. You can go on and make sure that everything is secured inside your cluster, all those backend services, etc., are secured with all the Calico network policies. And even if you're on Calico Open Source, with Calico Whiskey, you can still sort of validate and check that your ingress traffic is being routed correctly. You can sort of keep an eye on the load, keep an eye on those flows, as well as enabling your security. So I know that we are sort of on time at the moment. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll just kind of run over some of the resources that I have added for this session today. So I know it's not winter anymore, or at least sort of over here in North America, it's not winter anymore, but this is where we sort of first released the Calico Ingress Gateway. So I've still got a link to that blog in here. There's an introduction to Calico's Ingress Gateway, which is sort of a more hands-on sort of lab style. So if you want to go and experience actually enabling Calico Ingress Gateway as like a sandbox environment with a cluster, setting up some load balancing, HTTP splitting, etc. And we've got a workshop there for you to have a go at that. The Calico Quick Start Guide is what you can see open on my screen at the moment. So if you're not an existing Calico user, but you want to get Calico installed inside your cluster, you can follow our Quick Start Guide. And then you can also find the instructions for enabling Ingress Gateway under networking as well. So you can see here, the second option here is how to configure and enable your Ingress Gateway, which is very simple, just with one command to sort of enable that Gateway API support. And then the last option I've got there in the Docs tab in your engagement panel is just if you're more interested in a personalized demo, you want to sort of understand or see how Calico Ingress Gateway might fit best in your cluster or some of the other Calico functionality. So you can always click on that to sign up for a personalized demo. So for HTTP request tracing, just one of the questions in the chat. I don't know if I will have any in my cluster at the moment. Let me see if I can sign into sort of Calico Cloud, the sort of more commercial one. We do have application layer logs for our commercial editions, so Calico Cloud, Calico Enterprise, where if you enable sort of layer 7 or application layer logging, you will start to see, like in the flow logs table, you'll be able to see all of the HTTP requests that come in. You'll be able to see sort of method, the response code, etc. I don't know if I'll have any that I've used inside my cluster recently, but I can see if I can sort of sign in and show you what I'm talking about. So let me just swap my screen share. And I guess to the second question as well, are there any issues to enable Calico Gateway API if Istio Gateway classes are only enabled? I don't know if anybody has sort of tested that or if anyone's tried to do that and sort of hit any issues. I would say the best place to ask, I wouldn't want to sort of give you the wrong information either, is if you're not already in our Project Calico Slack community. I'll put an invite link in the chat now. So that's where we have our sort of developer advocate. A lot of our sort of Calico open source engineers hang out in that Slack group. They just put the link to the Calico user Slack. The best place to ask would probably be in there so you can get the sort of correct answer from the developer team themselves, honestly. So that's where I would recommend you checking out. And then I know that we have sort of application layer policy support if you have Istio and Calico installed in the same cluster. But if you don't, let me swap my screen to a different one. So this is Calico Cloud now. As you can see, very similar to the free tier. I've got a few more options down on the left. And haven't sort of run any sort of test traffic in this cluster in a while. It's a little bit busier than the other one. But you can see I've got this HTTP tab down at the bottom now. So it's not just sort of the normal, I would say, sort of network traffic flows, but you have other options for DNS and HTTP as well. And then you can see in here, maybe not, but you can see there's sort of traffic going from the load generator, the source type. If I scroll across, you can see the method, the user agent URL, should be response code and everything in here. And the one thing that's helped me out a lot as well with this is the capture jobs. So being able to set up packet capture directly from within Service Graph. So you can see that you can right click on any namespace, any pod workload, initiate packet capture. So that's helped me troubleshoot this application actually. So I was sort of calling out to an external AI service to generate product descriptions. I was getting 403s back unauthorized, and I didn't know why. And I was sort of just finding out sort of top level response code information here, being able to do a packet capture, I could actually see the full response coming back from that service that way and just opening it in Wireshark. And then with the commercial addition to Calico 2, you also get a lot more dashboards. So again, I guess for ingress traffic, application layer traffic, there is a dashboard specifically for that. So you can start to see all the HTTP requests, the services, the duration of those requests, which might be good for performance, error codes, etc. So hopefully that helps answer your question, or at least you can send you in the right direction of the Calico user Slack group to get your question answered. So I'll keep the chat open. I know we're a little bit over time now. And the last thing what I'll do is just launch a sort of end of session survey, just a chance to give us your feedback, tell us a little bit more about you and your experience with Kubernetes and Calico at the moment. And this just helps us improve these sort of demos, workshops, webinars, and etc. Everything going forward. So I'll launch the survey now. If you're able to fill it in, very much appreciated. I'll stop sharing my screen, mute myself, turn my camera off, and just sort of hang out watching the chat in case any more questions do come in. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll hopefully see you at one of our online events again soon.